Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 46th episode of In the Trenches, Kroll's weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. This is Keith Wojcicki, Global Head of Cyber Threat Intelligence for Kroll. This week, we're joined by George Glass, Dave Truman, and of course, our in-house expert, Sarah Becker, all from our cyber threat intelligence team. Today is April 15th, 2024, and we'll be covering the most recent trends our threat intelligence team is witnessing in the trenches. So today, let's talk about news you can use. So Fortinet has addressed a dozen vulnerabilities in several products, including the critical severity remote controlled execution or RCE issue, tracked as CVE 2023-45590. There's a CVSS score of 9.4. The vulnerability is an improper control of generation of code or code injection issue that resides in the Fortinet's client Linux. An unauthenticated attacker can exploit the vulnerability to execute arbitrary code by tricking a Fortinet client user into visiting a specifically crafted website, or as we know it, as a command and control center. Below is a list. We're going to attach a list of affected products and versions. It's going to be Fortinet Client 7.2, 7.0, 7.06 through 7.10. And just take a look on the website and you can see which ones you need to upgrade to. There is a fix for that. Secondly, Apple has announced they have released threat notifications to users in 150 countries. Apple's threat notifications aim to alert users potentially targeted by high-cost, sophisticated mercenary spyware, often linked to state actors or companies like NSO Group's Pegasus. Everyone has heard of Pegasus. These notifications are part of Apple's efforts to combat attacks that, despite the rarity and focus on specific individuals, pose a significant digital threat. Users are notified via their Apple ID web login through the email message if Apple detect activity suggesting a mercenary spyware attack. Honestly, this thing is great. From testing and talking to individuals about this, it's about a 90% effective rate. So it's really good, for this, that they're doing this. So if you haven't, take a look at it. It's some really good stuff that Apple has come out with. If you have any questions or concern, please contact Kroll at cti@kroll.com. That's cti@kroll.com. Now let's get into today's briefing. Today we'll be covering the following trends our team is concentrating on. Out-of-band alert of PAN-OS. George is going to cover Patch Tuesday as well as Malware Spotlight. We're going to get over to Dave for BatBadBut, and of course the Ransomware Roundup with Sarah. So George, there are a few topics we'll be covering today, talking about the PAN, Patch Tuesday, and malware. We've seen a new 0-day that is providing a backdoor to PAN-OS firewall since late March. Can you talk about that and let us know what the 0-day is, and also, follow up with the Patch Tuesday as well as DARKME for the Malware Spotlight. So without further ado, George, I'm going to turn over to you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Yes, so let's start off with a out-of-band notification that we released last week concerning PAN-OS Global Protect. Researchers at Velexity announced last week that a critical severity vulnerability CVE 2024-3400 was being exploited in the wild, and that affects PAN-OS versions 10.2, 11, and 11.1. The vulnerabilities have been exploited since at least the 26th of March, and there's been some more information released over the weekend outlining some of the malware and tradecraft that the threat actors used. The assessment is currently that the in-the-wild exploitation was focused and targeted to deploy the upstyle backdoor. And Unit 42, part of Palo Alto, have a report out over the weekend that details some of the attacks that were going on that made them aware. Also over the weekend, patches were released and the version numbers are there. There are also workarounds for this vulnerability. However, deploying the workarounds does mean that you need to be a Palo Alto customer with a threat prevention subscription, and the threat ID that you need to enable is 95187. Or if you're unable to deploy the patches, which of course we recommend in time, another workaround is to disable some of the logging and telemetry features that are available in PanOS. And all of that detail is included in our out-of-band briefing and on the Palo Alto website. We also took a look at the attack surface. Maybe unsurprisingly, the United States hosts far and away the most PanOS devices, 16,000, nearly 17,000 devices. So the attack surface for this is very, very great. Even though this has been used to target very specific organizations, it's not beyond the realms of capability for other threat actors to develop an exploit for this and begin using it. So of course, we're recommending that everyone perform the mitigations, but of course patch as soon as possible. Speaking of patches, let's go through last week's Patch Tuesday from Microsoft. And this was a big one. 157 vulnerabilities were fixed. Many of them are rated as critical or important, 56. It also includes 2 0 days and a significant number of those remote code execution vulnerabilities affect SQL Server. So let's just draw attention to the 2 0 days. The first one is CVE 2024-26234 with a CVSS score of 9.7, and this is a proxy driver spoofing vulnerability. This was discovered exploited in the wild by Sophos, who reported that a malicious executable file signed by a valid Microsoft hardware publisher certificate contained a backdoor that used an embedded proxy server to intercept network traffic and monitor it on infected Windows machines. That initial access vector for that was a phishing email, and as then they discovered this vulnerability existed. As of the 10th of April, Microsoft has assessed that the following exploited vulnerability was exploited, and they have revoked the impacted certificate files that were used in that attack. There's some more detail in our bulletin, and so I'd recommend you read that for further details on that one. The second 0 day is CVE 2024-29988. This vulnerability has a CVSS score of 8.8 and is another smart screen prompt security feature bypass vulnerability. According to the 0 Day Initiative, who discovered the operation of this vulnerability in the wild, it operates very similarly to CVE 2024-21412, which we covered in our bulletin on the 19th of February. They state that this has been weaponized by KTA 265, also known as Dark Casino or Water Hydra, to deploy DARKME malware, which I'll detail now. So, what is DARKME? DARKME is a remote access Trojan, mostly focusing on the finance sector, and the distribution method is a drive-by compromise with very targeted websites or phishing attacks. Those spear phishing and drive-by compromise attacks really do focus on Forex trading platforms, financial advice, and things like that. So very targeted, very specific to a certain industry, which is fairly interesting from a malware point of view. Typically, those operating malware are trying to cast as wide a net as possible with their deployments, but in these particular cases, it seems to be extremely focused on the financial sector. KTA, DARKME uses 2 vulnerabilities, one which I detailed earlier, CVE 2024-21412, and CVE 2023-36025, which we've also covered in previous briefings last year, to deliver URL files that are able to bypass Smart Screen and indeed allow a WebDAV connection to be made and run an MSI installer. That is a critical path to the exploitation of those two vulnerabilities and installing a malicious package on the a victim's host. That MSI installer drops a .cab file from the same WebDAV share, which initiates the DARKME downloader, which is a VB script, again designed to contact the command and control server and pull additional layers of malware, which is the DARKME loader, a DLL, which installs the DARKME rat. Again, as with all of these reports, there's more detail in our weekly briefing, so we really recommend you go and read that if this story is of interest to you. And with that, Keith, I will hand back to you.
George, thanks so much. Really do appreciate the update and everything you just went over here today. So Dave, we have another critical vulnerability being exploited in the Windows systems. Can you provide us some details on the vulnerability, BatBadBut?
Yep, thank you. Flat Security disclosed a command injection vulnerability that affects several programming languages, with Rust raising the CVE 2024-24576. The vulnerability lies in how these programming languages interact with the Windows create process API call. The vulnerability arises when create process is called for a Windows batch file and cmd.exe is automatically spawned to handle it. This usually occurs if the file name passed to create process has a batch extension such as .bat or .cmd. It can also occur if create process is passed a file name without an extension and a batch file with that file name is found in the Windows path. cmd.exe, like many operating system shells, can expand variables and use command output as input variables. If a program takes input from a user and passes that as an argument to a batch file without appropriate controls, an attacker can manipulate that variable to trick cmd.exe into running it as a command rather than treating it as direct data. The issue is made more complicated due to cmd.exe having a different escape character to other programming languages. Most programming languages use backslash as an escape character, but cmd.exe uses a caret character instead, meaning that standard escaping routines that developers might rely on to avoid command injection won't have the same effect for cmd.exe command lines. Different programming languages that have been affected by this issue are treating it differently. Some are writing patches, however most are just updating documentation. It is recommended that developers update code to use new escaping routines and validate user input as well. Any vendors for third-party tools that spawn batch files based on user input should be contacted to confirm their tool is not susceptible to this vulnerability. Thank you. Keith?
Thank you very much, Dave, for providing the overview. Appreciate that. Now to the ransomware expert, Sarah Becker. Sarah, there was a major healthcare breach this past February. I know there's some major communications going on, and you do have the latest on that. So with that, take it away, Sarah.
Yeah, of course, Keith. So on April 8th, one of the rebranded groups now named Ransom Hub, they have listed the Change Healthcare, which Keith already mentioned that that happened back in February, but the group claiming that attack was LV Black Hat. But now Ransom Hub is claiming to have that data, and this post was created on April 8th. On their post on their data leak site, the Ransom Hub stated that LV stole the ransom payment for the $22 million, and that Change Healthcare and United Health paid in order to restore their systems and prevent the data leak. However, we have the data and not LV. So that data leak site post, it continues with Ransom Hub saying that they have over 4 terabytes of the stolen Change Healthcare data. And they are also listing kind of within that post what clients or organizations underneath Change Healthcare and Optum Health and United Healthcare who are affected, and any other kind of sensitive information such as PII. It's interesting to see, though, on that post that whenever they listed out the affected organizations like Medicare, CVS, HealthNet, MetLife, it was an almost identical copy and paste of when Black Hat posted that. So there was speculation of, how did Ransom Hub get all of this data? So one of the bigger known security researchers actually was in contact with one of Ransom Hub's admins, and that admin did state that they do have one of the FB affiliates that was a part of the Change Healthcare attack and that they have joined Ransom Hub. So it explains a little more of how Ransom Hub does have the Change Healthcare data as they claim. And it also shows that, again, once other ransomware groups kind of fall apart or there's a takedown, that they kind of scatter and will go to other ransomware groups. So as of right now, Ransom Hub was saying in their post earlier that if Change Healthcare fails to reach a deal, then they will sell all of that data to the highest bidder. Right now, as of today, they did update their post just with some sample data screenshots. This is kind of to show that they have proof of this data. Again, the data has not been posted yet. They kind of put a little warning phrase at the end of their post saying that 5 days until the timer goes off and either that data gets published or it's going to get sold. So we're keeping up to date on this because the Change Healthcare attack was a big attack that affected a lot of organizations and a lot of healthcare systems. So we're keeping updated just to see what happens with this data. That's it for me, Keith.
Sarah, thank you so much for the amazing work and cutting intel. Fantastic. So with that, today is actually National Take a Wild Guess Day. So we all have stats here. We all yearn for information and intelligence. So in honor of today, the holiday, Take a Wild Guess Day, I'm going to give you a guess and see what happens here. So for example, how many 14-inch pizzas would it take to cover a football field, including the end zones? Now this is an American football field, not not in the UK. So I'll wait for 1 second. Boom. If you guessed 53,860, you are exactly correct. And now if you guessed that, actually you should go play the lottery. So take a wild guess day. Go ahead and play it with your friends and family and see what happens. I would like to thank everybody that has taken the time to tune into Kroll's weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. We do hope you found the session informative. If you have any follow-up questions about this briefing or any other questions pertaining to cybersecurity or cyber risk, please contact the team at cti@kroll.com. That's cti@kroll.com. Thank you very much, especially all the presenters, and hope everyone has a wonderful day. Take care.